For me, you can kind of tell sometimes when people started reading comics and kind of what era they were from by some of the titles that they remember and were kind of key to their growth as loving comics. Well, one of those titles for me is a little book called Zot, and it was published by Eclipse Comics in the kind of mid '80s through the '80s. And if you knew about this comic, it's funny because right now people listening to this video either have no idea what this comic is or they immediately recognize it and they're surprised others don't know. So let's talk about Zot. Hey everybody, this is Perch. Zot, it's one of those little unknown comics. It was published by Eclipse, and it came out in the mid-'80s, and it was a guy named Scott McCloud. So Scott McCloud was the writer and the artist, and you might remember Scott McCloud from probably what most people remember him for these days, which is the Understanding Comics kind of book where he really talks through sequential art, and it's must reading to kind of understanding comics and everything that goes along with them. But at the same time, if you just know Scott McCloud for that and you never picked up Zot, you're missing a pretty interesting comic. And what's really telling is in this comic, a lot of the ideas and kind of themes and things that he created have been, liberally stolen. Let's say. That's too mean. I just borrowed, influenced. Lots of other creators have tapped into these kinds of themes. So as I'm talking about the comic, you might remember like, oh, that sounds like blank. And you're right, except remember this came out in '84. So there's a good chance a lot of comic creators were influenced by Zot, particularly comic creators in the '90s and the early 2000s were influenced by this work. I think the comic creators out now probably are like at least half my audience who have never heard of this thing. But anyway, so what was it? So all told, even though it ran for several years, it was only about 38 issues, 36, 38 issues. And a few of them were in color. Most of them are in black and white. Like I mentioned before, it came out for Eclipse Comics by Scott McCloud. And McCloud talked about, his influence was Astro Boy. So if you ever read Astro Boy and kind of that world and that environment, definitely there's some themes that might come into the picture there. Others have compared to Flash Gordon and books like that. I think that's missing kind of a little bit of the point of what Zot was all about. But basically, Zot is the main character, and it's a blonde-haired, blue-eyed teenage hero, and there's an alternate Earth. So there's basically two Earths. There's a darker Earth and a kind of a light, bright, happy, fun Earth that may have some problems underneath it. And these two kind of parallel Earths basically get breached so Zot can pass between them, and he meets a girl named Ginny Weaver. Now, this comic is a superhero book. It's a little bit of science fiction. There's some dramatic elements, and then some compared it to a romance. It's not really a romance, of course. Zot and Ginny is a kind of relationship that goes on. But anyway, as they go into the two Earths, Zot's planet is this retro. It's like Tomorrowland in Disney World. It's a utopia. There's technology everywhere. There's flying cars and there's robots and people are into space and they're flying around with guns. It's generally a peaceful, happy place with occasional problems. Now, by the way, at this point, I'll break off and say, if you read Invincible, this comic is probably for you. You probably would really kind of, love a lot of what's going on here. Even though it's short, there are some similarities there as well. So on Zot's Earth, the good guys typically always win. It's like a TV show. It's where, some conflict comes up, very sci-fi, very kind of, cool stuff happening there. And the good guys typically win. And on Ginny's Earth, it's, the Watchmen Earth. Well, that's too dark. But it's dark. Things are not as good. It's the real world. It's more depressed. And there's a lot of kind of, downtrodden aspects of this. So Ginny winds up going with her brother, and they go to Zot's world, and there's shenanigans that go on there, and I won't spoil it for you, but there's a lot of kind of bouncing back and forth between kind of the sci-fi villains over on Zot's world, and then kind of coming to understand Ginny's world. And there's some, big over-the-top kind of supervillains. This is where it feels very much like a superhero comic, or very much like Invincible, where you have these bigger-than-life kind of villains doing villainous things, and Zot has to take them down. And there's, kind of the villain of the month almost. They're usually spaced out more than just one issue, but there's a lot of stuff like that. And then at one point, Zot gets trapped on Ginny's Earth. And that's where, we kind of realize that, this Earth is darker, and why is that? And what are the areas that this Earth has maybe a more real experience or a more truthful experience than Zot's world? And what areas of it are more, need improvement, or where things didn't evolve like they should. It's an interesting story. It deals with some social commentary. It deals with kind of the nature of reality and other pieces to it. Again, this is the 80s. And so what again strikes me is there's a lot of comics today that talk about dealing with different kind of dramatic elements that are, people are like, oh, for the first time, we're doing this. It's like, no, actually, the comic that was influenced by Astro Boy back in '86 was doing this, and doing it very, very well. So there's a lot of interesting kind of pieces. It touches upon kind of teenagers and kind of how they come into their own. It's not YA by any stretch of the imagination, but probably if it was taken and kind of reworked slightly, it would probably be a very successful YA book, but maybe reworked more than slightly. It is just a very, very strong sci-fi superhero book. Again, Scott McCloud does some pretty incredible work, particularly in just kind of moving the panels forward. Lots of great stuff. It's a fun title. And I highly recommend it. Even though the majority of the run was in black and white and not color, you had just really, really nice panel work that most companies would just go crazy for today. And you had a lot of, you just had some really good complex issues. I guess, if you enjoy manga, and in particular, you enjoy, even from way back, you enjoy some of the Rumiko Takahashi stuff, or today, if you enjoy some of My Hero Academia and kind of that feel to it, you might enjoy this. It definitely has that kind of, bigger than life, lots of, dialogue and angst and action, and being able to combine the two together and have, some crazy adventures and just all over the place. It's a good book. Might be a little hard to find, unfortunately. So in today's time, I think I was just going to go look. I'll do it while I'm talking here, because I happen to not be driving for a change when I'm doing this. But Zot may not be the easiest thing to pick up. Not a lot of comic stores have it. There is a good collection in black and white, as I've just noticed, that you can get on Amazon. You can have it Prime one day. But so there are some good pieces there. It's worth picking up. You can get a pretty good run at your local comic shop for at least in paperback, for $25, 30 plus issues. And that's a pretty damn good deal with just a lot of really, really good art. McCloud did not skimp on the art. And as you'll see probably as I'm putting some of the backgrounds into this video, you'll see quite a bit of pretty incredible, stuff that you just don't see today in a lot of cases with comics. But anyway, good drama, good kind of, some good action, some good heartbreaking kind of moments, and back and forth. But in general, some really good stuff. So Zot. So check it out, ZOT. Interesting little comics, something different. Get a little bit of superhero, get a little bit of teenage drama angst, and get a lot of some interesting kind of concepts about kind of alternate realities and universes. And definitely, as you go through this, you will notice a lot of storylines and similarities to comics that come out today that borrowed heavily from Zot, and I'm sure McCloud borrowed them from other places as well. But anyway, some good stuff. Very much 80s. The art also, the sensibility is kind of like the 80s. Plenty packed in there, but some may find the style a little bit dated. But anyway, worth looking at. Zot, definitely recommend it. Check it out. Let me know in the comments below. Have you heard of this comic? Did you read it? Did you like it? What did you think about Zot? And what did I miss here? I'm sure I missed a ton. I'm trying not to spoil. It's hard to do a run like this and kind of recommend a comic without spoiling anything in the comic. I give you a little bit of the flavor to it, but there's a lot more to it. But anyway, leave a comment below if you remember Zot, or if you'd recommend it to somebody else, or if you think I'm completely off base and this was a terrible comic. Warn people, let them know that too. Anyway, hey, like, subscribe, check, see if you're still subscribed. If you haven't subscribed once before, sometimes YouTube just decides to unhook you for no apparent reason. That's always fun. Anyway, most importantly, thanks for listening.